At some point, someone told you that you were being dramatic. Maybe it was said directly, with a roll of the eyes and a dismissive wave. Maybe it was softer than that. A sigh, a subject change, a look exchanged between two people that you were not supposed to catch, but did. And something in you went quiet, not because they were right, but because you did not have the words yet to explain why they were wrong. Here is what nobody told you in that moment. What they called drama was not drama. It was precision. It was you naming something real, something that was genuinely happening in the emotional landscape of that situation, in a world that did not have the vocabulary or the willingness to meet you there. And instead of being understood, you were managed, minimized, filed away under too much. Psychology has a name for what you were doing. It is called emotional honesty, and research consistently shows that the people who practice it most fluently are also the people most frequently misread, most often silenced, and most likely to eventually stop speaking their emotional truth altogether. Not because they were wrong, because the cost of being right became too high. Today, that changes. Here is exactly what is happening, why it happens, and what it actually means about you. Psychologists define emotional honesty as the ability and willingness to accurately identify, name, and communicate one's internal emotional experience without distortion, suppression, or performance. It is the opposite of emotional avoidance. And here is what makes it so frequently misunderstood. Most social environments are not built for it. Research in communication psychology suggests that the average person has an active emotional vocabulary of fewer than 10 words. Happy, sad, angry, fine. When someone arrives in a conversation with the capacity to say something like, "I notice I feel overlooked in this dynamic," or "something shifted between us and I want to understand what it was," they are operating in a register that most people around them have never been asked to access. And what people do not recognize, they often dismiss. Pattern 1. You name emotions before others have processed them. Emotionally honest people feel and identify what is happening in a room faster than most. They name the tension before it has surfaced. They articulate the discomfort before anyone else has acknowledged it exists. And when you name something that others have not yet consciously registered, you do not look perceptive. You look like you are creating the problem. The emotion was already there. You simply had the language for it first. But in a world where naming something is confused with causing it, being first to speak becomes the evidence against you. Pattern 2. Your emotional language is more specific than people are used to. There's a significant difference between saying, "I am upset," and saying, "I feel dismissed," when my experience is minimized in conversations like this. Both are honest, but the second one is precise. It identifies the emotion, the trigger, and the relational dynamic in a single sentence. To someone with a limited emotional vocabulary, that precision does not read as clarity. It reads as intensity, as rehearsed, as calculated, as dramatic. What is actually happening is that you are communicating the way a surgeon operates, with deliberate, careful accuracy. But in a room full of people who handle emotions with blunt instruments, your precision looks like overkill. Pattern 3. You express emotions in real time instead of burying them. Most people have been conditioned to process emotions privately, quietly, and preferably invisibly. Feeling something in public, let alone naming it, is treated in many social environments as a breach of unspoken protocol. Emotionally honest people disrupt this norm, not out of recklessness, but out of genuine internal wiring. They feel something and they say so, in the moment, before the feeling has been safely compressed into something more socially acceptable. And that immediacy, that refusal to perform composure they do not feel, gets read as volatility, as instability, as drama, when what it actually is courage. Pattern 4. Your honesty makes other people's suppression visible. This is one of the least discussed and most important dynamics in this entire pattern. When you speak your emotional truth openly, you do not just reveal yourself. You inadvertently illuminate everyone around you. People who have spent years learning to suppress, minimize, and compartmentalize their own feelings suddenly find themselves standing next to someone who simply does not. And that contrast is deeply uncomfortable, not because you did anything wrong, but because your honesty functions like a mirror. And people who are not ready to look in a mirror will find a way to cover it. Calling you dramatic is one of the most efficient ways to do that. Pattern 5. Sit with this for a moment. Every pattern described so far, the early naming, the precise language, the real-time expression, the mirror effect, none of these are symptoms of instability. None of them are evidence of being too much. They are evidence of a person who has developed a rare and genuinely sophisticated relationship with their own inner world. The problem has never been that you feel too much. The problem is that you landed in rooms that were built for people who feel less. And the solution those rooms offered you was silence, shrink, simplify, make yourself easier to digest. And many of you did, for years. Pattern 6. You are honest about pain in environments that prefer performance. There is an unwritten social contract in many relationships and workplaces that says we perform wellness even when we are not well. We say, fine, when asked how we are. We show up composed when we are quietly falling apart. Emotionally honest people struggle with this contract, not because they are attention-seeking, but because performing an emotion they do not feel registers to them as a form of self-betrayal. When they say, I am not okay right now, they are not making a scene. They are refusing to lie. But in environments built on comfortable performance, honesty reads as disruption, and disruption gets labeled drama. Pattern 7. Your emotional memory is longer and more detailed than others expect. Emotionally honest people do not just feel things in the moment. They retain the emotional texture of experiences with unusual clarity and depth. They remember not just what was said, but exactly how it landed. They can return to a conversation from 3 weeks ago and articulate precisely what shifted and why. When they bring this up, they are not dwelling or being petty. They are being accurate. But to someone whose emotional memory is shallower or whose instinct is to move on quickly, that precision looks like holding grudges, like manufacturing problems, like being dramatic about something that should have been forgotten by now. Pattern 8. You refuse to pretend that something hard was not hard. Perhaps the most consistent marker of emotional honesty is the refusal to retroactively minimize a genuine experience. When something was difficult, emotionally honest people will not agree that it was fine. When something hurt, they will not perform recovery they have not actually done. This refusal is frequently misread as weakness, as an inability to move on, as making things bigger than they are. What it actually is integrity. The emotional version of not signing a document that says something happened differently than it did. You lived it. You know what it cost, and you will not pretend otherwise simply to make someone else more comfortable. Here is what all of this points to. You were never dramatic. You were precise in a world that was still learning the language. You were honest in environments that had decided honesty was inconvenient. You named things that others preferred to leave unnamed, because naming them would have required everyone in the room to feel something they were not prepared to feel. The label dramatic was never really about you. It was about the distance between your emotional literacy and the emotional literacy of the people around you. And that distance is not your deficiency. It is simply a gap, one that says far more about what those environments could hold than about what you were capable of offering. You were not too much. You were too honest for rooms that had made a quiet agreement to feel less. And the question psychology leaves you with is not how to be less honest. It is whether you are finally ready to stop apologizing for a gift that was simply given to the wrong audience. Because the right audience exists, and they have been waiting for someone who finally says the true thing out loud.